Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to day 6 or day 7 of Sustainable Tallahassee's 50th anniversary of Earth Day video series here. Tonight's episode is actually our what would normally be our green drinks event. This is a once a month kind of mixer presentation series that Sustainable Tallahassee usually does in person at Publix Greenwise on Gain Street. But of course, because of the coronavirus crisis, we're doing this at home and on live stream. But this format is usually, like I said, every last Monday of the month, we gather in person. We have drinks, we have conversation, we have a presentation from a special speaker that we invite in at a different topic each month. So while our speakers get set up, I just want to take this opportunity to remind you all that Sustainable Tallahassee is a 501c3 independent nonprofit group. We receive very little funding from city and county government. Most of our funding comes from you, the community, via donations and membership contributions. So this Earth Day, we're really looking to get some new members, have new people join us in our sustainable efforts. And the best way to do that is to become a sustaining member at sustainabletallahassee.org. Sustaining members make monthly contributions, and that really helps us with our fundraising and helps us have a consistent and steady source of income that allows us to focus on really running our programs rather than spending a lot of time on the fundraising. We also, of course, recognize that in these hard times with the economy being what it is, that if it's something that you need help with, that if you see a need in the community that Sustainable Tallahassee might be able to fulfill, please reach out and let us know. You can do so either by messaging us on Facebook here, or by sending us an email at admin@sustainabletallahassee.org, or you can reach me personally at mikemitchell@sustainabletallahassee.org. So with that, we have a great show for you tonight. We have Bergen and Henry, who are going to talk to us about permaculture and integrating sustainable design into your everyday lives. And I'm going to go ahead and bring them in now and let them introduce themselves. Bergen and Henry, you guys are on.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, guys.
Thank you. We appreciate y'all reaching out to us.
I'm going to add your slides in here, take myself out, and let you guys go ahead. Please just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then it's all yours.
Hi, guys. My name is Bergen, and this is Henry. We're from Tallahassee Permaculture Center, and we are staff of the local Divine Garden Project, the local nonprofit.
And we like to grow food for people and also keep kids and adults out of grow their own food.
So we're going to be talking about that.
Today we're going to talk about permaculture and you, how you can apply this sustainable design science to your context, whether it be a yard or your house, container gardening. There's a way for everyone to grow their own food and be more sustainable.
So we're going to go ahead and move forward with permaculture principles. So, of course, there's so much to go over in permaculture. There's many aspects and ways to use it in your context. So we can spend 15 minutes on each of these principles. We're going to focus on just a couple today.
Hey guys, I'm sorry. Can I just
interact?
1 second here? I don't want to. Sorry. Apparently, we're having some difficulty hearing you. Can you move closer to the microphone? Maybe speak a little bit louder.
Got it.
Headphones if you have them.
Should we get headphones? Will this work?
If you have headphones with a microphone, that might be better.
I'll get that.
Okay, great. We can do that.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I want you guys to be able to hear all the fun stuff we got to talk about tonight. Well, can you hear me a little better now?
Yeah, we can hear you. I think it was actually Henry we were having difficulty hearing.
Okay, we gotta speak up. Maybe he'll put on the microphone. All right, so how's that?
Can you guys hear me better now?
Much better.
Okay, sweet.
All right.
We'll project into the computer.
Yeah,
for
I'll
y'all.
just project for you guys.
Okay, cool. So back to our permaculture principles. We're just going to discuss 5 today. Ones that will probably be most applicable to your space, whether it's in a backyard, a balcony, a small terrace space. We'll figure out what works for you. So we're going to discuss observe and interact, catching and storing energy, using and valuing renewable resources and services, integrating, as well as valuing the edges and the marginal.
All right. So we'll go to observe and interact. So permaculture, the scientific method starts with observations. If we want to affect our context, if we want to change the hydrology or the fertility of your yard, then we must understand the current context. I have resources in the notes about how you can calculate your sun exposure in your yard with a sunlight tracker. Water is very important. How water flows in your yard has a lot to do with the topography. And permaculture often uses topography and altering topography to change the growing conditions for plants, or to even store water and energy in the form of water. Microclimates are very important, as different microclimates will be ideal for different plants, as they have different growing condition needs. So some plants grow really well in a shady area. A lot of people say they can't grow in their backyard. Well, there are plants that grow in a shady area under a live oak. And then other plants need full sun. So we have to look at the context of microclimates. And then also soil types is very important when you're growing food. And I have a link to a resource from NRCS on how you can find your soil type and understand how you need to amend your soil to grow better.
So if you're in this stage, as we said in the notes of this link, we'll make this PowerPoint available to everybody. We have all of these links so you can go in and type your own address and find out your specific context in terms of light, soil, topography, everything that you need to kind of get started designing.
Great.
So it's mine. So our next principle is catching and storing energy. And so we may already do this in our homes, whether it's collecting our compost to use outside as soil or food for our chickens.
Having curtains.
Yeah, having curtains to help with passive heating.
Passive cooling.
Facing certain structures and garden spaces in your home on a south face for more light, north facing for different conditions. So really consider all of the assets and resources that you have in your context. For example, here up in the corner, this is our terrace, our second floor concrete porch. We decided to bring some greenery up there. Next to it, we have a rain barrel, which we use to collect water from actually condensation on our air conditioner. It can be used to catch rainwater from a gutter, but now we not only have container space up here, but we are able to catch water, catch this energy, and also use the passive energy of the water since it's elevated up off the ground.
Yeah, since water raised will follow gravity, it has a natural pressure. So you can collect energy just by collecting water higher up, so you don't have to use a pump to distribute the water.
Yeah. And if you have some soil concerns, if you don't have enough nutrients in your soil, you can collect fallen wood, trees, mulch, and make a hugelkultur. We'll have a separate resource for that for those interested, and start building soil and catching energy, nutrients, water in that way.
Renewable resources are very important in permaculture. We had to clear out a lot of weedy, invasive trees, and instead of throwing them away, burning them away, we used a lot of them to make more resilient and water absorbent garden beds known as hugelkultur beds.
We do this with chickens, actually. So that's their service.
And you can use wood chips, you can use logs, any rotting wood that is not a pine, because pine is antifungal. But also chickens, ducks, worms, bees, other pollinators. These are all animal services, animal workers that can utilize. Chickens can till soil, chickens can fertilize, chickens can come in after a crop, take out all the pests and clean up the debris, wait 3 months for the chicken manure to properly decompose, and then you have a garden bed ready to go. Ducks are used as integrated pest management. Integrated pest management is an idea that we can use animals and critter insects to get rid of our pest insects in our garden.
And those eggs. So, hey.
Another really important part of permaculture is integrating rather than segregating. Integrating meaning instead of having an orchard and a vegetable garden separate, we have vegetable rows going through the rows of an orchard, maximizing the use of space, maximizing the use of sunlight, and allowing these organisms to interact in a way like organisms interacting in an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, different plants and animals support one another to create a more resilient system. And using edges is very important because edges in an ecosystem have the most resources. Think about the edge of a forest where it meets grassland. You have more sunlight than the forest would have, so those trees have more sunlight. You have more nutrients than the grassland would have because of the leaf litter. And at that edge, you'll find the most species diversity of bushes, wildflowers, trees, and we can utilize that to stack diversity on these edges, like growing cucumbers on the side of a fence, using vertical gardening, growing mushrooms on the side of a garden bed. If you're using wood, we've grown shiitake out of the side of garden beds, for example. And here we'll just go into grow food, not lawns. We all know that lawns are not sustainable. Lawns use a lot of labor, gasoline, fertilizer, pesticides, and for part of the year they don't look that great either. So you can replace this brown, dry, drab lawn with a vibrant food forest. This is a food forest in New Jersey that uses many of the same species we could grow here: peaches, plums, olives, all the vegetables grown together as an ecosystem in your front yard and your backyard. We've done this in neighborhoods and in the country. And as long as you don't have a homeowners association, you can turn your lawn into a thriving garden or food forest.
All right, so how do we get started? We've talked about all the elements of a permaculture design, the things to consider in your own context, in your home and house, if you have a little bit of space. And so let's start designing. Your design could be as simple as some garden beds in the backyard. As we see over here, we've got some nice straight lines, beautiful boxes. Things are nicely labeled and kind of in a controlled environment. As we move right to these other designs, we see a little more movement, perhaps a more natural progression in how things operate in that, more organic systems. So notice how over here we have zones. Do you want to talk about zones a little bit?
Yeah, so another important part of permaculture designing is zonation. We use zones based off of how much maintenance an area needs or a project needs and how far away it is from the central hub of activity. Zone 0, as we can see in the upper middle picture, is where the house is. Zone 1, for example, would be where the garden is. Usually annual vegetable garden, you have to harvest several times a week and maintain the garden several times a week. For zone 2, you would do commodity crops that don't have to be maintained as much, like corn or squash that can just sprawl out and not be taken care of as often. Zone 3 would be a food forest. You take care of food forests or orchards several times a year. When you're in the active harvest season, you might be there more often, but otherwise you don't have to visit that place as often, so it's farther away from the house. Zone 4 would be a well-managed wood lot, or where your mushroom logs are. You don't have to take care of trees growing as often. And then Zone 5 is a place where we leave room for the wild, because we learn from the wild, and there is a lot of diversity that we can utilize. We can utilize wild medicinals and wild edibles. So zonation is an important part of organizing where we put things and helping us decide where we want our garden, where we want our food forest.
So how do we get started? As you said, permaculture can be a little intimidating. There's a lot of resources and content and ways to incorporate it into your space. But if you want to go ahead and get started, consider your soil, building cover crops. Whether you're not ready for a garden yet, maybe some clover seed, or perhaps another cover crop for the summer is a sweet potato vine. You not only have coverage that is beautiful, but you have food at the end. So we're stacking these functions when you think about what you need and what your space looks like. If you have a lot of weeds in the back of your or the front of your yards, consider figuring out what they are. Are they medicinal? Do they help with pollinators? Are they going to bring diversity to your new edible landscaping? And of course, consider soil builders. We talked about building soil with chickens or with permaculture, or go ahead and start a compost pile. It can be as primitive or as high tech as your needs allow. And let's see, how about starting to grow your design? So now we're moving forward. Some things are developed and we want some food, we want some yields. So we have different contexts here. We can do a vegetable garden just out of the ground. You might not need boards, lumber, or any of those kind of inputs that do require resources.
As you can see on the bottom, the raised garden beds. Many people think they need wood. We use logs as borders. This just helps with erosion. You can create raised beds directly in the ground. All you need is compost and maybe some organic fertilizer, worm castings. And we also wanted to add container gardens for people. You know, you can grow tomatoes, lettuce, basil, all indoors. You can use LED growing lights. You can use regular light bulbs. There's so many tutorials on YouTube. There's so many resources for growing inside if you have an apartment or on a patio. I have container peppers so I can bring them inside in the winter and they can be my pet peppers. But I also have peppers in the field. Another great start is herb spirals. Herbs are usually perennial, and herbs will last for years. We still harvest from a 20-year-old rosemary plant at my mom's house. So herb spirals are just a spiraling garden bed that continually gets higher in elevation as it spirals around upwards, so that the plants that need more dry conditions can grow at the top, like lavender or rosemary, and plants that enjoy more moist conditions can grow towards the bottom where it's more moist. Edible earthworks are an example of berms and swales. A berm and swale system is a ditch next to a hill. The ditch can grow very nice wet plants, wet-loving plants. The berm, the high and dry area, will grow plants that need more dry roots and can still benefit from the water that's being caught in the lower basin next to the raised area.
Let's move on to the next one. So if you're ready for the next step, perhaps you have a little more space, or you just want a little a lower maintenance, lower input way to design your landscape, perhaps consider a food forest.
Yeah, a food forest is a great example of what permaculture is. Permaculture is looking at an ecosystem and mimicking it to create a food system. So in a food forest, it's different than an orchard. An orchard is usually one type of commodity crop planted en masse, or planted exclusively, like a monocrop. A food forest is polyculture. A food forest is a polycrop of different layers of a forest, like a canopy. So you have the top canopy, which would be like a pecan, for example. Grows very tall, still lets a good amount of light in, and other plants will be able to grow underneath it. The mid canopy could be a citrus tree. I know orange trees, they grow about 20 feet tall, and that would and they can grow in partial shade as well. So you have two canopies, maybe grow blueberries in the open areas around the citrus trees, and then under that you have herbaceous species, maybe companion plants. This is another important part of food forestry. You're not just growing food, but you're growing plants that are going to support your main production plants. For example, you can grow pigeon pea or other legume plants that are good for coppicing, meaning cutting down and laying on the ground, because these plants, they fix nitrogen from the air into the soil. So you are gaining nitrogen, the biggest macronutrient, from the air instead of having to add it as fertilizer. This is a more sustainable system because you have plants that are accumulating nutrients for your commodity crops.
And your food forest can look many different ways, whether you're just using just a fence line for fruiting vines, or you want to use a wetland area for a rain garden or exotic medicinals. How about using the citrus tree? Henry was talking about guilds, planting herbs around a citrus tree in a nice big sunny area in your yard, providing a little more shade and a little more beauty and, of course, food into your landscape. Perhaps you're not ready for food and you just want flowers and you want to support the native pollinators. Perhaps looking into native plants that bloom at different times of the year.
And she was talking about guilds. Guilds are just plants that are known to complement each other. You can look up permaculture plant guilds online.
Yeah, we have some of those resources in the notes and comments section of these PowerPoint slides.
And we have plant lists that will be great for a food forest in Tallahassee.
UF IFAS Extension Office has a phenomenal encyclopedia of resources of North Florida native plants, fruit and nut trees. Right on this slide right here, we have a nut calendar and a fruit and nut calendar of every month in this area, what is fruiting, and of course more resources about how to fertilize and take care of those particular trees. Yeah, lots of resources.
You could plant something that will be producing at every time of the year. With that much diversity in a food forest, you'll never be hungry.
There you go. And
here are a bunch of resources that we suggest. There are so many great nurseries that can help with gardening projects. Native nurseries, Tallahassee Nurseries, Just Fruits. We are part of the Demayan Garden Project. We install school and community gardens. Treehouse Permaculture Center is our farm, and we also do consultations, paid consultations for homeowners who would like to install gardens or food forests.
Yeah, so if you want to move forward with some of these designs, we'll make sure to get our email out, and you can contact us, and we'll set up probably.
We'll answer questions for free. Red Hills Online Farmers Market is a great way to connect with the local food hub. There's over 50 different farmers selling their local produce and homemade goods.
Yeah, so check it all out.
So thank you guys for joining us, and we hope that your permaculture garden thrives in the coming years.
I guess we can. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, thanks guys so much for doing this. This was really interesting. We're gonna go ahead and open this up now to the audience. If you all have questions, please go ahead and post them in the comments section here, and we'll read them off as they come in. So I wanted to get us started off here. Can you guys tell us a little bit about your personal experience with permaculture? So where did you get started?
That's a great question. Well, let's see, I guess you can start. I discovered permaculture through Henry. I had already been gardening and using holistic practices in my growing of annual foods, but Henry also introduced me to permaculture.
So my story with gardening, I'll say my mom's watching. So she was gardening before I was ever born. Let's start there. And then also the Mayan Garden Project helped my mom and my dad start their first garden at their new property when I was a child. And I've been gardening with the Demayan Garden Project in my school since I was 6 years old. I volunteered with the Demayan Garden Project and taught gardening to kids in high school. And then I was obsessed with YouTube in college and came across permaculture. And it just so happened that while I was obsessed with watching permaculture YouTube videos, there was a certification program at the IFAS Extension Office. And I signed up with friends, and I took the permaculture certification course when I was 19. And I've been practicing ever since. I now live on 20 acres that my family has given to me, and I'm developing it into a permaculture farm. They also have 2 acres in town that has 50 different fruit trees on it, gardens, and they're trying to be sustainable in town as well.
Yeah. And then I jumped on not too long later. Luckily, after a couple years of practicing permaculture, the Extension Office provided another certification course. So I got my certification in 2018. And so we've been practicing ever since.
What do you think is the hardest thing about permaculture?
There's so much content and there's so many ways to design. I mean, I have the Bill Mollison textbook is so thick, and there's so many ways to figure out your context. I think that's the problem, is that some people want to jump in and get started, but they got to take a step back and figure out what's good for their context. I think that's probably the hardest.
And Morgan Rosa asked about what the Mayan Garden Project is.
Oh, yeah.
This is a over 20-year-old nonprofit that has been installing gardens in residential areas, schools, and community centers, and been teaching kids and adults how to garden.
Yeah, we partner with FSU and the Extension Office and other local.
And our mission is to increase food security in the local community.
Yeah. So it blends perfectly with permaculture and our people care, Earth Care, Fair Share, People Care. That is just one element of our grand design of how we practice permaculture, is supporting community initiatives and resiliency.
Great. So we have another question here about if there are any citrus trees that do well in Tallahassee with our cold winters.
Ooh,
so as Tallahassee warms up more and more, I've been able to grow increasingly harder to grow citrus trees. I would say the only ones that you have trouble with in Tallahassee right now are limes. My limes consistently die maybe after 5 years when there's a hard freeze under 20 degrees. But especially if your citrus trees are grafted with a cold hardy rootstock, which most are at any of the nurseries we listed, you can grow citrus very easily in Tallahassee. And we are growing citrus in Tallahassee and in Woodville, and they are different microclimates. Mm-hmm. In sandy soil, you need to fertilize your citrus trees more often, and in clay soil, you need to make sure that the citrus trees aren't getting root rots or root bound in the clay. But they do fine with the weather if your trees have cold hardy rootstock.
Yeah. We recommend satsumas. They're delicious, easy to peel, and they produce pretty consistently, and they're one of the earliest to produce.
Satsuma tangerines.
Satsuma tangerines, yeah. So that's our recommendation in terms of buying trees.
You guys had mentioned that you come out and you do consultations for homeowners. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of things you look for, what kind of services you provide there, and what a homeowner might expect to get out of that?
Yeah, so we'll come out, and the biggest questions I ask are, what are your intentions? How much time do you have to maintain this project? And then I look at the growing conditions for their intentions. Say they're trying to have a garden and they're trying to put it on a slope. Well, that's fine, but they need to know that they want to position their garden beds perpendicular to the slope so that water doesn't accelerate going down the slope and increase erosion. So there's a lot of things we have to look at in the context of your property. I'm also very familiar with all the native species in the environment. I was a field botanist for over a year professionally, and so I can identify most trees and weed species for you, telling you which ones are invasive, which ones are desirable, and which ones are a nuisance native. And I can also tell you how you need to amend your soil. If you have fruit trees that I did something for somebody recently that they had fruit trees that were sick, I can identify diseases. So just a general garden consultation, food forest consultation. Because I'm so busy these days, I'm not doing installations as much.
Sure. So, folks, if you have questions, please go ahead and post them there. This conversation really depends on you all. So a question that I had was, what do you recommend for people who have shady yards? There's not a lot of sunlight.
Some tropicals, things like turmeric.
Yeah, turmeric and ginger grow well in shade. Herbs,
great edibles.
leafy vegetables, especially in the fall and spring when that shade might protect the leafy vegetables from the intense sun we have.
Yeah, the shade might be an asset in the summertime. So maybe you want to grow some greens, lettuces, kale in the summer, but it might be too hot in a sunny area or too buggy. You might be able to work with that that shade in that context and get some season extension out of food.
The biggest thing you have to think about with shade is fruit-bearing vegetables need a lot more sunlight to produce fruit. So you're going to be much more successful with vegetative plants, vegetables, greens, maybe root vegetables, but most likely greens and herbs,
and of course
ginger,
natives.
turmeric.
Understarting native plants.
Yeah, so there's a great observation here on the side that it sounds like it's really more like growing things that fit your land rather than trying to make your land fit plants.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's when we were talking about looking at our topography and our water movement, and so we really want to bring those ideas into our design, right? Because that is essentially how we're going to irrigate, how we're going to move nutrients and soil. But yeah, so it's everything is about what's going to work for you, what's your soil like, and so
yeah, that's the reason that soil is very important, because here at Treehouse Permaculture Center, we are growing in white sand, which is a lot different than the sandy loam and clay we have at my parents' house in Tallahassee. And I've noticed the differences in growing conditions, and I have to say radishes are doing great out here, whereas some plants that require more nutrition, like leafy greens, are doing much better over there.
Yeah, and it's been fun getting to know different spaces. We not only work, of course, at our space, Henry's parents' space, all of the gardens through Demayan, but I also have a market garden on Lake Jackson, which is the top of a clay hill. And so it's I've had to implement water catchment with large machinery and move things, and it's a lot of clay and it's super compact and it's a lot of minerals, and it's very, very different from Treehouse, and it's 30 minutes away, so we have many different kinds of soils, even in Quincy, out west. So it really just depends on your area.
Yeah, and some properties they'll have multiple types of soils. If you have wetland soil, for example, and we usually don't want to disturb wetlands. I'll tell people that's illegal. Don't dig in swamps.
Just observe those areas.
Yeah.
We got a couple questions here real quick. If people are interested in having a garden consultation done, how much does it cost and how do they get in touch with you?
So I charge $20 per hour. And depending on how far away you are, I will probably charge gas if it's really far away, and drive time. But otherwise, you can contact me at hengwynn@gmail.com. And Bergen and I also will do free consultations, usually for schools and community centers who wish to have a garden.
Or community,
that's for the Demayan Garden Project.
Yeah.
For residential things, you can look up Henry Gwynn on Facebook. You can add me at Treehouse Permaculture Center on Facebook, and I can reply to you there, or you can email me, and we will provide my email.
Okay,
great, thank you. So another comment on here that I really do want to read out is that, Bergen, your papa would be so proud. Can you please explain the different kinds of irrigation systems that you use? I'm guessing that's a family member.
Thank you. That is my mom, and my papa was a farmer in Georgia who became a vet, and so that's that connection. But in terms of irrigation, that is a good question, because irrigation can be as primitive in terms of rain catchment, or as high tech with water irrigations as you need it to be. What we use is just a simple hose with a sprinkler jet that goes back and forth. Our system works best that way. We liked using the micro jet, but when you're in certain areas, they clog. Animals and pests can bite into them looking for water.
Basically, we had to buy a lot more plastic.
Yeah, a lot of plastic
for a less water use system.
Yeah.
Whereas we have culture beds, which are rotting logs inside the center of our garden beds. So I only water once or twice a week, and I haven't watered for a month with all this rain we've had. So what we usually do is we'll do an overhead irrigation every 3 days.
Yeah.
We'll do it every day for a couple days to get things germinating sometimes, but not very often.
And that's where we go with catching water in our landscapes. Right?
And for smaller systems, microjet and drip irrigation systems are great for conserving water.
Yeah, I have an herb garden by the door. It has a microjet that I turn on right next to the water bowl. So it just depends on what area works and what you need.
Great. So last question here. Are there any food plants that might become exotic invasives that we should not plant here, even if they might be producing exciting foods?
That's a great question.
I'm just going through the list of plants in my head. I killed invasive species professionally, and let me say those were introduced for a reason. But I don't think people are playing kudzu for their goats as much these days. I would say I've had things naturalize a lot.
Probably bamboo.
Bamboo.
Bamboo is a top one that permaculturists love to use.
Clumping bamboo is better than running bamboo, but people plant running bamboo for their garden stakes or their garden trellises. Mm-hmm. I don't know of many plants that produce food that are invasive, but I do have a lot of plants naturalize, which I kind of promote. But I have had like apple gourds take over. Apple gourds could be invasive. Gourds,
like the pretty gourds that you put on your desktop.
I have apple gourds coming up all over the farm because I thought they were cool looking, and they would grow up pine trees and have gourds dangling from the pine trees everywhere.
It was cool, but
now I have apple gourds growing everywhere, and then I looked up that they're invasive.
So look up your ornamental versus your native edible plants, and
Seminole squash will become invasive, but if you eat them fast enough, it's not really a problem. They will come back every year if you let a pumpkin rot in your yard. But I love naturalizing different things, and that's another way to have a food forest. I have tomato plants that come up on their own, sweet potatoes, Seminole pumpkins. After a while, these things will self-propagate, and you don't even have to sow them. So that's one benefit of something being a little more invasive. You call it naturalizing if you want it around, if you want it to invade. But I'll get back to you about that, Dylan. Mimosa.
Yeah.
That's
a medicinal.
Don't plant mimosa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll think about that more. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, invasive edible. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. So seeing no more questions, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Is there anything else that you all want to add that you haven't gotten to yet?
I think we did a lot of talking.
I just wanted to reflect on during the COVID virus, people have been increasingly concerned about who's handling their food. And if you're growing your own food, you're the only one handling your food. It's the safest food. You know what went into it. You know who touched it. I'm providing CSAs a lot for people right now because they don't want to leave their house, and they have gardens and they want to expand their gardens now. So let this be a lesson to all of us. We must have our own food plot or our own pet vegetable plants. I've advocated this since I was 18. We will need to grow our own food. There will be emergencies. There will be hurricanes. And so let's take this seriously. It's fun. It's creative, but it's also really important to us. And so if you want help, we're here to help you. We can do a phone call consultation. We can do an in-person consultation. You can ask us questions by email. We're here to help.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Bergen and Henry, both for taking the time to talk to us tonight. And thank you, folks, the audience, for tuning in. This is, like I said at the beginning, day 6 of our 8 days of Earth Day celebration video series. So far we've talked about renewable energy and energy efficiency on the first day. We talked about home sustainability, everyday sustainability, Sustainable Tallahassee's Community Carbon Fund. We've also talked about water usage, so sustainable water. We've talked about, I'm trying to remember now all the different things I've talked about in the last couple of days. Sustainable food system last night and partially tonight. And then tomorrow night, we have 2 of our members of our Rags to Bags team. You may have heard that they are sewing face masks. They are taking old reusable or old fabric that would have otherwise been thrown away, and they're sewing it into face masks now to hand out to the community. And then wrapping it up on Wednesday night, I'll be talking about electric vehicles and the benefits and the ownership experience with EVs. So please join us every night here at 7 o'clock for the next 2 nights at least. And for those of you who missed the first couple of nights, those are recorded and posted on our Facebook page along with this video. And once again, Bergen and Henry, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Take care, guys.